Good evening, you're joining with Business Today on ChannelEye, and on this program, if you have been an avid fellow of this program, you probably know what we do on this program is to bring entrepreneurs and business people to the program to discuss about entrepreneurship and also to enhance your knowledge when it comes to business. So today also, although we might not be speaking with an entrepreneur or a business personality, we are speaking with someone who is knowledgeable in these aspects, an economist. So when it comes to the guest today, we have Jayani Ratnayake, economist from the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, joining with us today to discuss about the recent development of Sri Lanka's economy when it comes to the currency fluctuation in terms of and also against the US dollar and other currencies in the country. So welcome on board. Great to have you on board as well.
Thank you for inviting me.
Right, so let's speak about the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. Now, this is a name that is well known, but a lot of people don't know what exactly is going on inside the chamber. So speak a bit about that.
Yes, so the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce is the first chamber to be established in Sri Lanka, and it's turning 183 years.
Whoa.
This March actually. So the Ceylon Chamber is one of the first chambers in the Asia Pacific region as well. So the Ceylon Chamber is actually a representation of many businesses, many economic sectors in Sri Lanka. So if I'm to share some stats with you about the membership, so we have over 500 members who are representing large business firms as well as many small and medium sector firms as well. And apart from the membership, we are also affiliated with some of the key business sector trade associations that are operating in Sri Lanka. We have affiliations with over 20 such trade associations representing sectors like exporters, importers, many services sectors like IT, banking, tourism, tea, rubber, you name it.
Everything.
Yes. And also, interestingly, the chamber is also affiliated with many regional chambers which are spread across the country. So therefore, our outreach of businesses is over 8,000.
Right, so which means you as the chamber, you bring the news of like the good news of Sri Lanka's entrepreneurial culture to the outside world, and you link with them so that we as a whole bloom as a country. That's exactly what you do. All right, so let's get into the subject today. Now, when it comes to the CBSL's move to float the US dollar, now this is not a new thing because we have seen that happening in Sri Lanka and also like outside of the country as well. No, I mean not the US, not the Sri Lankan rupee, but then again, their own currencies, especially Brazil. We can if you go back 1999, you see what happened. So, so the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce has commended CBSL's move. And has also, because it has also been an advice that you have given to the Sri Lankan economy to do way back. So let me ask you, why exactly is that? If you explain that broadly, why is that?
Yes, so let me approach a question by maybe discussing a bit about Sri Lanka's current economic trajectory as well. So when we look at Sri Lanka's economic growth, especially during 2021, so we have the growth figures for the first 9 months.
Right.
So what we see is that there has been a rebound in growth, and we have seen a growth level of about 4.4% during the first 9 months as expected. So this growth was really supported by some of the actions that was taken by the government during the early part of the pandemic. So as we know, if you could remember, during the early months of the pandemic, the government started rolling out a massive fiscal stimulus program with moratoriums, really supporting some of the businesses to get back on track, and also many individuals as well to face the pressures of the pandemic better. And to support that, the central bank also started accommodating a very loose monetary stance, which we saw through reductions in the interest rate and multiple reductions, with the interest rate really hitting one of the lowest rates that we have seen in the past of Sri Lanka's history. So with that, there has been a boom in the consumption levels in the economy. So the growth level that we saw during 2021 was really a consumption-driven one. So if you really see the role of consumption in GDP, the household consumption accounted to about 86%. So therefore, we see that the economy has been really expanding with the support of the government policies that was in place during the period.
Right.
But during that time, we also see, because of the massive fiscal stimulus and also other accommodative policies, that the debt pressure has also been mounting up. So therefore, the government has been on track in settling its debt obligations so far, and therefore some of the compromises that may have been made will be related to some of the related to the reserve position of the country, like the Forex availability. So especially since, like we can say from mid last year, we have seen some pressure being felt by the private sector in terms of opening up LCs, in terms of getting input to support their manufacturing process, be it for domestic consumption, be it for exports. Because of the Forex issue, we saw early signs of pressure building up in the private sector. So that's when we started really recommending to the government that we need to look at this from a more market-oriented approach. And in fact, we have made few recommendations, some of them through direct, we can say, representations or submissions to the government, through discussions, as well as through press releases as well. And like we all witness now, so it has really become a very, we'd say, it has really become an issue that's felt across the economy. So we feel it as sometimes, issues with the fuel supply, be it power cuts, shortage of gas, or many other essential commodities. But it all boils down to one thing, because of the Forex issue. So that's why the Ceylon Chamber really made that, the press release and the recommendation. And that's why the Ceylon Chamber really, not just on its own, but also getting together with other chambers that are operating in Sri Lanka, really welcome the government's move to have at least a managed float exchange rate for Sri Lanka, because it really supports to bring some of the macroeconomic variables back on track.
Right. Okay. So which means you share the knowledge and also share the knowledge of the other chambers in other countries, and you also try to embed that here and see if we can fix it, and if we can also can try to stable the currencies in Sri Lanka. Right. So you mentioned, I picked one thing when you mentioned it's because of the consumerism why it happened, right? And so imagine this coming from a layman to an economist. You're being an economist. If I ask you, is it just because of that? Is it not about the lack of production of the exports?
So if you really look at the export figures of Sri Lanka, 2020 was a record export year for Sri Lanka. We had 12.5 billion worth of export in goods only, and it was a 25% growth overall on a year-on-year basis. And when you look at the performance of some of the key export commodities like apparel surpassing a $5 billion figure, both tea and rubber surpassing a $1 billion figure, and even average export figures, there have been 7 months where we have surpassed the $1 billion figure. So in terms of exports, in terms of production, things have been moving well. So it's not only consumerism, it's many things affecting the status of the economy. Things that we have witnessed and things we have felt because of the pandemic. And also because the pandemic is not just affecting Sri Lanka, it's a global thing. So some of the issues that we see is also because other countries are also facing inflationary pressures, supply pressures. And there have been many other factors, like really when you look at the logistics operations, very high freight costs really affecting the prices. So it's a mix of many things, not just the consumerism.
Not just that. Okay. And I also learned recently that Sri Lanka's foreign reserves fell by 76%. But also countries in the same region sort of increased their foreign reserves at the same time within the same pandemic duration. So what, in your sense, because I'm asking because these are the questions that the public might have, what do you think happened in that sense? What did they do better than us?
Yeah, so when you really look at Sri Lanka's context and you compare it with other countries, one of the key issues that we have is the high level of debt. So we do have to honor our debt obligations, so we need to keep on paying our debt on and on. And how we have been really managing it also through, obtaining further loans to roll out the debt. And And on the other hand, when you have a very fixed kind of an approach to managing the exchange rate, how you manage is also through by compromising on your reserves, because you need to use your reserves to defend your currency.
Like gold.
And yes, exactly. So that has been two key factors where Sri Lanka has been different to some of the peer countries.
Right. So, well, if you compare that now, the situation, I mean, it's even though the prices have soared, it's stabilizing at the moment. It's stabilizing in the sense like the dollar value against the US dollar, against the Sri Lankan rupee is stabilizing even at a high rate. Do you think it's healthy for a country? I mean, I'm talking about the Sri Lanka itself, but talking about the entire, all the countries out there. Do you think it's always is good to maintain, let the currency to float, or should we force it to fix?
Well, it's not merely an issue whether you're going to fix it or float it. I think it's really a part of a massive economic stabilization approach.
Right.
Because when you look at Sri Lanka's context, it's not really a discussion like whether we need to keep our rupee fixed to the dollar at a particular price, but what cost, what you really need to compromise in order to do so. And we have seen the results.
Exactly.
And you don't have to be an economist to understand the severity of it. So in Sri Lanka, what we need to really focus, I think, right now is how we really manage this debt situation.
That's right, yeah.
Because we may not have immediate answers to this. There won't be an immediate fix. It's a medium to long-term journey that we need to take, but we need to do it very systematically, very strategically. So therefore, there are many measures that we need to take.
Right.
So the float of the exchange rate, a managed float, at least up to 230, is actually one of the first baby steps that we have taken. And that's why the Chamber is really commending the government for taking that.
There's a long journey to go.
There is a long journey to go.
Right.
And there are many other corrective policy measures, many structural changes that need to follow suit. So only then that we can really stabilize the economy and really get the growth back on track.
Okay. So you said that from the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce you had a few more recommendations. If you can give us a few more examples about what, but then the citizens also understand, okay, this is advice coming from eminent personalities to the government. So what kind of advices did you provide?
Yes. So if I'm to also just comment a bit as to how we have making these recommendations and what is the process we have been really following. So in my early parts of the discussion, I mentioned that the Chamber is a representation of many business segments in the economy. So we do have discussions with these businesses from time to time to get their input. And we also do many member surveys and industry surveys to understand what kind of issues that they're facing, and so that we can understand what is the best recommendation that we can give to the government, because then it's evidence-based as well. So recently we actually did a member survey to understand what is the impact of the Forex crisis on our businesses. So it's interesting, the majority of the businesses that really responded to this survey were importers.
Right.
Simply because that the importers felt the severity of it more than any other segments.
Yes.
About 25% were engaged in both import and export, because import is a major, import is playing a major role in their production process. So we looked at what are the outstanding obligations for these businesses. So these close to about 90 firms that took part on the survey said they have about $500 million outstanding.
Wow.
In terms of settlement to their suppliers or foreign parties at that point in time. So that's just on a going basis. You can imagine what level it would be.
Like credit.
Yeah, exactly. And for the input that they have sourced, they have to settle it. So it's a massive pressure. So if you are to sustain your business, if you are to maintain these business relationships, the suppliers, you need to really keep them paying on time to time, and you have to honor those debt obligations. So another interesting way we looked at this is also whenever we get the input, we have a set of sectoral committees at the Chamber that is being represented by some of the experts in those sectors, in the private sector as well as public sector as well. Some of them are cross-cutting, like economic policy, taxation, energy. So those are thought leadership groups, really. So these member issues, when it comes to the sectoral committees, they sit and discuss, and we deliberate, what further action has to be taken, and then only we make the recommendations. And some of those recommendations, when we feel it has to come from a bigger voice, we do join hands with our fellow chambers as well. So what's interesting is, on these recommendations, everyone has stood together, because the pressures they are feeling are all the same, and the recommendations, they stand together. So one of the key recommendations that we have made, because most of the issues are linked to the Forex crisis, and the Forex crisis is very much linked to the debt issue in Sri Lanka, we need to enter into a path. We need to have a very systematic approach in dealing with this debt issue. So when you focus on the debt sustainability aspect, one of the key recommendations that the Ceylon Chamber has really given is, to start working with the International Monetary Fund or the IMF, especially to get the technical support. Because it's very important to work with an institute like the IMF on the technical aspects, because they can really help a country like Sri Lanka to understand what are some of the action that we need to take in terms of preparing a debt sustainability analysis. Because the experience that comes from there is not just very country specific, they have rolled out similar, let's say, studies in other countries as well. Like in the recent case, we've seen in Argentina, in Ecuador, the IMF providing technical support, and these countries have been able to come up with better economic plans and have been able to resolve some of the issues and bring the economies back into a stable path. So therefore, that has been one of the key recommendations the Chamber has been making.
Okay.
And debt sustainability plan has to be supported by many other policy action as well. Because as we all know, the debt issue is also rising because of some of the fiscal related issues that we have had in Sri Lanka over decades. So we need to really look at how we manage our fiscal policy better. So sometimes we need to really understand what are some of the strong decisions we need to take in terms of curtailing some of the expenditure measures. We say expenditure rationalization. So we need to understand what are the expenditure that we need to really focus on, and what are the expenditure that we need to cut out in order to really get the economy back on track.
And that they have done slightly these recently times.
Some of the measures would say, like we've seen the government taking measures to have free pricing in some of the commodities that have been sort of managed over a long time. But if you look at things like electricity, like we have not seen a revision since 2012. So, but when you hold it for so long and try to fix it at once, then it's going to be a massive increase, which is really difficult for the consumer to take. So therefore, it has to be more systematic in how we approach it. So there's no one-time fix for it, but rather we need to look at it from a very long-term perspective and see what are the corrective actions that we can take. And also, what we need to remember very carefully is we also have very vulnerable segments in the economy who might really face difficulties because of the inflationary pressure, because of the other economic instabilities that are out there. So you need to also figure out a program that can really target these vulnerable groups and give them the correct, the right supporting, the targeted support, so that they also get through these difficult periods better as citizens. So it's a comprehensive approach, I would say.
We really hope that organizations like yourself, like the Chamber of Commerce, and also many other organizations, will also give their knowledge to the public and also the government to make sure that they will be able to sustainably survive the situation we are in at the moment, I would say. So we'd like to thank you once again for coming in, because now we have come to the end of today's program and spoke about Sri Lanka's, the bank's CBSL's decision to float the US dollar against Sri Lanka, and how the Chamber of Commerce, Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, has been in support of that, because it has always been an advice that they have given. Thank you so much, Jayani Ratnayake, for coming in today. She's an economist from the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, who joined us for an insightful discussion on the matter. And thank you for our viewers as well for joining in. We'll come back in the next episode with another insightful discussion. Have a good night.